Welcome to Kidmissing TV. I am your host, Angelina Wilson. This is my birthday case because it is my birthday, August 4th. This is the story of Henrietta Lacks and the so-called Hela cells. This is a case that is so fascinating, but could have been done in so much better way. Henrietta, in 1951, was living in Baltimore, and she went to Johns Hopkins. It was one of the only hospitals in the area that would treat African Americans. And she wasn't feeling well, and she was bleeding a lot, female bleeding. So they did an exam, and they found a large tumor on her cervix. They biopsied said tumor, and the cells didn't die. And the cells didn't die. Cells are still alive. They were the first immortalized human cells. But they never told her, they never told her family. She passed away from cervical cancer. She grew up in Clover, Virginia, with her maternal grandfather because her mother died in childbirth with her 10th child, and her father couldn't take care of all those kids. Her families were tobacco farmers, and she shared a room in her grandfather's house with her with her later to be husband, who also happened to be her first cousin. Not unusual back then. Mm. Um, she left school in the 6th grade to help support her family, continued to work in the tobacco fields, tend animals, and the garden. At 14, she had her son Lawrence. Then she had her daughter Elsie, who had cerebral palsy and evidently was nonverbal, and they thought deaf. They say deaf and dumb. Dumb is not, in that sense, that's what the word dumb means. The word dumb means unable to speak. It does not mean stupid. um, in 1941, they married in Halifax County, Virginia. Later that year, their cousin, Fred Garrett, convinced the couple to leave the tobacco farm and move to Turner Station near Dundalk, Maryland, so David could work in Bethlehem Steel, because that's where the cousin worked, and they were making much better money. Garrett ended up going to World War II not long after this. Um, and they bought a home in Turner Station, which is now part of Dundalk. I wish used to pronounce that Dundalak. And that area was one of the oldest Black communities in Maryland, in Baltimore area, in Baltimore County. She was diagnosed with cervical cancer 4.5 months after her last child was born. Yikes. Elsie was placed in the Negro home for the insane, which was common back then. No, the hospital for the Negro insane, later renamed Crownsville Hospital Center, where she died in 1955 at 15 years old. Historian Paul Lurs says that it is possible Elsie was subjected to the pneumoencephalography procedure, where a hole was drilled into a patient's head to drain fluid from the brain, which was then replaced with oxygen or helium to make it easier to see the patient's brain in X-ray. Good Lord. That's one I hadn't heard of. The Lacks were Catholic. She felt a knot in her womb. That was the first sign. And she was pregnant. She did give birth and she bled out. So they took a biopsy of her cervix when the OBGYN found the tumor. A Dr. George Otto Gray, who was a cancer researcher, got the cells. She evidently was asleep and didn't know they took them. So there was no informed consent. She was treated with radium tube inserts. Ouch. And then she had to come back for, they call it X-ray treatments, but basically radiation. When she went in on August 8th for her treatment, she asked to be admitted due to continued severe abdominal pain. She received blood transfusions and remained at the hospital until her death on October 4th, 1951. The cancer had metastasized through her entire body. Okay. There was a road named after her family, Laxtown Road in Clover, Virginia. And she's buried there in an unmarked grave in the family cemetery. And the section of Clover is called Laxtown. They believe she's within a couple of feet of her mom. So, but her mom's was the only one that was marked. And one of the researchers that worked with George Gray actually knew the family and paid for a headstone. Then they raised money for a headstone for Elsie. And her epitaph, written by her grandchildren, says, Henrietta Lacks, August 1st, 1920 to October 4th, 1951, in loving memory of a phenomenal woman, wife and mother who touched the lives of many. Here lies Henrietta Lacks, Hela, in parentheses. Her immortal cells will continue to help mankind forever. Eternal love and admiration from your family. Most cells in the lab only lasted a few days. These cells are still alive. How many years later? "70 years later." Well, actually, 74 years later. That is insane. And it became Hela because he labeled cell lines with the first two letters of the first and last name of the person. Wow. They injected these cells into people to see if they could give cancer to people. That's nice. Or to see if they could create an immunity to cancer. I don't think either one worked, but and Dr. Jonas Salk used them in his research for the polio vaccine. Excuse me. Hela cells were in high demand and went into mass production. Oh, good Lord. They were mailed to scientists around the globe for research into cancer, AIDS, the effects of radiation and toxic substances, gene mapping, and countless other scientific pursuits. They were the first human cells successfully cloned. Excuse me. Okay, I'm back. I got my birthday flower from my aunt. It is gorgeous. And the cell lines got mixed up with other cell lines by mistake. And so that's when I went to the family and asked for blood samples. That's when things started coming out. They didn't learn until 1975 that this was going on. Okay, at that time they didn't ask for permission and they didn't have to, which is ridiculous. There was a case that was brought before the California State Supreme Court in which it was called Moore versus Regents. Moore versus Regents of the University of California. This was in 1990. The court ruled that a person's discarded tissue and cells are not their property and can be commercialized. What? Okay. Um, they also found out in 2013 that Lax family DNA profiles were floating around in the public. Yikes. Um, so, yeah. Mm. In August of 2013, the family and the National Institutes of Health came together and made an agreement. Members of the family, 2 members of the family, would sit on the board that determined where the cells went and who had access to the DNA sequencing. They did sue one of the companies, and the company settled. Of course, the settlement was private. In 1996, Morehouse School of Medicine, Morehouse College is one of those traditionally black, historically black colleges and universities, held its first annual Hela Women's Health Conference, led by physician Roland Patillo. The conference is held to give recognition to Henrietta Lacks, her cell line, and the valuable contribution made by African Americans to medical research and clinical practice. The mayor of Atlanta declared the date of the first conference, October 11th, 1996, Henrietta Lacks Day. In 1997, Robert Ehrlich presented a congressional resolution recognizing her for her contributions to medical science and research. And Johns Hopkins in 2010 established the annual Henrietta Lacks Memorial Lecture Series to honor her and the global impact of Hela cells. She was granted a posthumous honorary doctorate in public service from Morgan State in 2011. She was inducted into the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame in 2014. And a planet was named in her honor in 2017. I mean, it's wonderful that she got all this attention 60 years after she died. Almost 70. Her family didn't know the extent of it until they talked to Rebecca Skloot, Skloot. She wrote the book, and the movie was actually based on it. And Oprah Winfrey was in it, I believe. Whoopi Goldberg. It was really good. So, and in 2020, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. 2021, 70 years after this happened. The Henrietta Lacks Enhancing Cancer Research Act of 2019 became law. This is what it states. The Government Accountability Office must complete a study about barriers to participation that exist in cancer clinical trials that are federally funded for populations that have been underrepresented in such trials. In England, in October of 2021, exactly 70 years after she died, a sculpture was unveiled in Bristol, England. By the University of Bristol at Royal Fort House in the city. It was created by Helen Wilson Rowe and was the first statue of a black woman made by a black woman for a public space in the United Kingdom. On October 13th, 2021, WHO, the World Health Organization, presented the Director General Award to Lawrence Lacks, the son of Henrietta, in recognition of her unknowing contribution to science and medicine. And this was the quote from Somaya Swan if Swananathan or Swananathan, the chief scientist at the WHO. She said, "I cannot think of any other single cell line or lab region that has been used to this extent and resulted in so many advances." I mean, they've got a bronze statue in Roanoke, Virginia. She was nominated for, and I believe given the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest honor to a civilian. Okay, Johns Hopkins never made money from it because they shared them freely. And they're trying to inform them better what's going on with the cells. This is a last quote from Johns Hopkins. "We are deeply committed to the ongoing efforts at our institutions and elsewhere to honor the contributions of Henrietta Lacks and to ensure the appropriate protection and care of the Lacks family's medical information." My goodness. I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope you were as fascinated by it as I have been. If you are, there will be links in the description to a documentary and the movie. So I hope you check those out and let me know in the comments. Bye, guys. God bless you, and I will see you Wednesday.